Welcome back to the deep dive. You folks have sent in a ton of stuff lately about AI and sustainability, especially when it comes to generative AI.
Yeah.
Seems like you're all really interested in those large language models and how much they need to really work and how all that impacts the environment. Looks like you've hit on something that's got everyone scratching their heads.
Yeah,
It's this AI efficiency paradox.
it is a bit of a head scratcher. We keep making these AI systems more and more efficient, like squeezing every drop of computation out of each watt,
Right.
but somehow we just end up using even more resources overall.
Yeah, that does seem kind of backwards.
Mm.
One of the articles you sent mentioned something called Jevons paradox.
Oh, yeah.
Can you remind me how that fits into all of this?
Jevons paradox. It's a fascinating thing, actually. It goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Back then, everyone was obsessed with making steam engines better,
Uh-huh.
more efficient. They figured, hey, better engines, less coal will burn.
Right. Seems logical.
But what happened? As the engines got better, they actually ended up burning more coal, not less.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. Why would that happen?
Well, here's the thing. Efficiency made coal cheaper.
Okay.
And when something gets cheaper, people find a lot more ways to use it. Industries that never used coal before, suddenly they could afford it.
Mm.
And the ones that were already using it, they just found even more ways to use it.
Okay.
Think of it like this. What if gas suddenly cost like a quarter of what it does now?
Oh, man.
You probably drive a lot more, right?
Yeah, I probably would.
Even if your car got way better mileage, you might say, hey, let's take that road trip we've been talking about.
You know what? You're right. I'd be all over that road trip. But how does that, relate back to AI today?
Well, it's the same idea. As we make AI more efficient, especially these large language models, the ones you're interested in,
Yeah.
it basically becomes cheaper to use. So that means more companies, more people, they're all going to start using it, right? And they'll find even more ways to use it. And ultimately, all of that new activity means we need more resources to make it all happen.
So even if we make each individual AI task more efficient,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that there are just so many more of them
Exactly.
ends up kind of canceling out those gains.
That's exactly right. And your sources actually have some real-world examples of this happening. Historically, like a 10% improvement in AI computing efficiency. Guess what? It leads to like a 20 to 30% increase in how much it's used overall.
Right.
So yeah, we're getting better, but we're also using a lot more.
Okay, that's kind of scary. I'm starting to see why they call this a paradox. So where is all this extra demand for resources showing up? I know the articles talked a lot about data centers.
Data centers, yeah, they're like ground zero for all this. They're growing so fast, it's unbelievable. Doubling in size, literally every few years.
Wow.
And AI, especially these big language models, they're a huge part of that growth.
Well, considering Jevons paradox and all this data center growth, can we really say these efficiency gains are good for sustainability?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something that researchers and policymakers are really struggling with.
Okay.
Even with all the improvements in data center tech itself, like using green energy, recycling heat, all that stuff, the fact that they're expanding so much is still putting a strain on everything.
So it's like a two-sided coin, right? You've got the AI itself becoming more efficient, and then you have the infrastructure that's
Yeah.
supposed to support it,
Right.
and it's struggling to keep up.
It's a constant game of catch-up.
Yeah.
We're making progress on both fronts, but the demand for AI is just growing so fast, it's hard to stay ahead.
Right.
And then there's the data itself, something people often forget about in all this.
Right. The data. It's like the main ingredient for these large language models. What kind of scale are we talking about here?
Well, let's just say it's mind-boggling. Some of these models, they need like hundreds of gigabytes, even up to a terabyte, just to store the model itself. And that's not even counting the massive amounts of data used to train them.
Yeah.
And all that data, it has to be stored somewhere, has to be accessible, it has to be managed. It all adds up.
So that's a whole other layer of this efficiency paradox I hadn't even considered. Storing and managing all that data, that's got to have its own environmental impact, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything from mining the materials for those hard drives, the energy to power all those storage systems, and then eventually you got to deal with the e-waste when it's all obsolete.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
So we've got all these forces pulling in different directions. The push for more efficient AI, but then this explosion of AI-powered apps and all the resources needed to support it. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is complex, but the good news is there are a lot of smart people working on this. There's definitely growing awareness about this AI efficiency paradox, and people are really motivated to find solutions that make AI both powerful and sustainable.
Well, that is good news. But before we jump into solutions, let's take a closer look at what companies are doing to develop AI in a more sustainable way.
Sure.
What are they actually doing?
One of the things that's gaining traction is this idea of right-sizing models. It's basically about choosing the best model for the job.
Okay.
So instead of always going for the biggest, most complicated model,
Yeah.
companies are starting to realize that sometimes a smaller, more targeted model can get the job done just as well. Absolutely. And beyond right-sizing, companies are also starting to think about sustainability right from the beginning of their AI development process.
So it's becoming part of the DNA of AI development,
Exactly.
not just something they tack on at the end.
That's right. And that's where things like auditing and optimizing resources come in, which we can talk more about next time.
Yeah, that sounds like a great place to pick up next time. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this AI efficiency paradox. It's a complex issue with really big implications.
It really is.
Really?
And the more we understand all this, the better decisions we can make about the future of AI.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to learning more. This has been a fascinating start to our deep dive.
Me too.
I can't wait to see what else we uncover.
Yeah, there's a lot more to explore.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about how companies are starting to bake sustainability right into how they make AI, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
But what does that actually look like, in the real world? What are some of the strategies they're using?
Well, one big area is this idea of auditing and optimizing resources, like you mentioned before.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like when you look at your energy bill at home and try to figure out where you can cut back,
Right.
Companies are starting to do the same thing with their AI systems.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do they actually audit their AI's resource usage? That seems a lot more abstract than, like, tracking my electricity use at home.
It's all about collecting data on the entire life cycle of the AI,
Okay.
starting from the very beginning. Like, how much energy does it take to train the model? How much computing power to run it? How much storage does it need?
Right.
By figuring out their AI's footprint, companies can then start to, make things more efficient.
So what are some examples of these optimization strategies? Like, how do they actually make things better?
Well, one cool technique is called model compression. Imagine you've got a huge document, right?
Yeah.
And you shrink the file size to make it easier to share and store.
Yeah.
Well, model compression is kind of like that.
Okay.
You can basically make an AI model smaller without really messing up its performance.
So it's like finding a more efficient way to run and store the AI, which in turn saves energy and resources.
Exactly. Another approach is to make the training process itself more efficient.
Okay.
Training these big AI models, it can use a ton of energy. So researchers are coming up with new techniques to try and cut down on that.
Oh, that's interesting. Are there any other areas where companies are finding ways to optimize resources?
Well, something as simple as scheduling can actually make a big difference.
Really?
Think about it. If everyone tried to do laundry at the same time, it would overload the power grid, right?
Right, makes sense.
It's the same with AI workloads.
Hmm.
Companies are starting to use systems that schedule AI tasks for, like, off-peak hours when energy demand is lower.
So it's like running your dishwasher at night when electricity is cheaper.
Exactly.
That's pretty smart. It seems like there are a lot of clever strategies being developed. But even with all that, doesn't Jevons paradox kind of suggest that we're just going to end up using more AI anyway?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
How do we escape that trap?
It's not enough to just make AI more efficient. We need to change how we think about AI and how we use it.
So a change in mindset, basically?
Both for individuals and organizations, we need to get away from this idea that more AI is always better. We have to think more critically about when and how we use it.
So being more intentional and strategic about our AI use.
Exactly. And that means a few things. First, we need some clear guidelines, some ethical frameworks to help us make the right decisions about developing and deploying AI.
So like setting some boundaries, thinking about the consequences of our actions.
Exactly. Second, we really need to understand the trade-offs between AI capabilities and how much resources it uses. We have to ask ourselves, are the benefits of this AI app worth the environmental cost? Is there a better way to get the same result?
Right, weighing the pros and cons, making informed choices.
Exactly. And finally, we need new economic models that factor in the true cost of AI, including its environmental impact. Right now, a lot of those costs are hidden. They're not accounted for. which makes it harder to choose the sustainable option.
So it's like making sure the price tag reflects the full impact of using AI.
Precisely. We need to create a system where developing sustainable AI is not just good ethics, it's good business too.
That makes sense. So it's a combination of things. Better technology, ethical considerations, and economic incentives. That's what will lead us to a more sustainable AI future.
That's a really good summary.
Well, that's encouraging. But speaking of economics, we talked earlier about the resource demands of data centers. Let's zoom in on one specific thing, cooling systems.
Oh yeah, data center cooling, that's a major battleground in all of this. As AI workloads go up, so does the heat generated by all those servers. Keeping them cool is a huge energy suck.
It's like trying to keep a room full of computers from melting down on a hot day.
Exactly. And the old school way of doing it, air cooling systems, they're just not cutting it anymore. They're not efficient enough for what we're doing now. We need something better, something more innovative.
So what are some of those innovations? I'm picturing giant fans blowing on rows and rows of servers.
That's how it used to be, but it's just not effective anymore. One really cool new development is immersion cooling.
Immersion cooling. What's that?
It's basically submerging the servers directly into a special liquid.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's non-conductive, so it's safe for the electronics.
Okay.
And this liquid can transfer heat away from the components way more efficiently than air can.
So it's like giving those servers a nice cool bath.
That's a great way to put it. Immersion cooling can really slash energy consumption. And it also lets you pack more computing power into a smaller space. Because you don't need all that bulky air conditioning equipment.
That sounds like a win-win. Are there any other innovative cooling approaches out there?
There's another one called two-phase cooling. It uses the idea that liquids absorb heat when they evaporate. So imagine a system where liquid absorbs heat from the servers, turns into vapor, and carries the heat away.
Okay.
Then the vapor condenses somewhere else, releasing the heat, and the cycle repeats.
So it's like a natural refrigerator, but on a massive scale.
You got it. Two-phase cooling is super efficient and can handle way more heat than traditional air cooling.
That's incredible. Are these systems actually being used anywhere, or is it all still experimental?
Oh, they're definitely being used. A lot of the big data center operators are trying out immersion cooling and two-phase cooling, and the early results are very promising.
That's great to hear. So it seems like the push for more efficient AI is also leading to new and better ways to cool those data centers.
Exactly. Innovation in one area often leads to innovation in others. It's exciting to see it happening.
It is, but we've talked a lot about technology. What about the human side of things, policies and regulations, things like that? What role do they play in making AI more sustainable?
Policies and regulations are super important. They can really shape how AI develops.
Okay, so what are some concrete examples of how governments are trying to, nudge the AI industry in a more sustainable direction?
Well, one thing that's becoming popular is carbon pricing. It's basically putting a price on carbon emissions. So companies have to pay for their environmental impact.
Well, it's like a tax on activities that produce a lot of carbon.
Exactly. This could be a carbon tax on data centers or these emissions trading schemes.
Okay.
Where companies have to buy credits to offset their AI-related carbon footprint.
So it creates a financial incentive for them to clean up their act. Are there any other policy tools that governments are using?
Sure. Another approach is to offer incentives for companies that make measurable improvements in their AI efficiency.
Okay.
This could be tax breaks, subsidies, or other rewards for developing and using sustainable AI solutions.
So it's a combination of carrots and sticks, penalizing bad behavior, and rewarding good behavior.
Precisely. And beyond those economic incentives, governments can also set regulations that create minimum standards for AI's environmental impact. For example, they could require data centers to hit certain energy efficiency targets.
Okay.
Or use a certain percentage of renewable energy.
So it's like setting the rules of the game, making sure everyone plays fair.
Exactly. And governments can also play a big role in funding research and development for sustainable AI technologies.
Right.
They can give out research grants, create partnerships between industry and universities, and set up these innovation hubs to speed up the development and adoption of more efficient AI solutions.
So it sounds like governments have a whole toolbox of options they can use to promote sustainable AI. But given how fast AI is changing and how global it is, I imagine there are some big challenges too.
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest is just keeping up with the speed of AI innovation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The technology is evolving so quickly that it's tough for policymakers to keep up and create rules that are both effective and relevant.
It's like trying to hit a moving target. Right.
Exactly. And another challenge is that AI is a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
Trying to coordinate policies and regulations across different countries, it can be a real headache.
I bet.
It's like herding cats.
Yeah.
You need international cooperation. You need to harmonize standards. Otherwise, companies will just move their operations to places with weaker rules.
Right. So it's a global problem that needs global solutions.
Absolutely. And beyond those structural challenges, there are also these cultural and behavioral barriers we need to overcome. We need to change how people think about AI and make them understand why sustainability is so important.
So it's not just about laws and rules. It's about educating people.
Right.
And changing how we think about things.
Exactly. We need to create a culture where sustainability is built into every step of AI development.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done. Both individual organizations and governments need to step up and steer AI towards a more sustainable path. But I'm sensing this growing momentum, this urgency to actually make things happen.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The conversation about AI sustainability is getting louder and louder. There's a real consensus that we need to act now if we want a sustainable future for this technology.
Well, that's a hopeful note. So we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the AI efficiency paradox after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking this whole AI efficiency paradox thing, and it's pretty clear this isn't just some tech issue. It's got its fingers in everything, from the actual code to like global treaties and stuff. But before we wrap things up, I want to bring it back to you, our listener. You sent in so much on this topic.
Right.
It seems like you're really trying to figure out what it all means for you personally.
It's a good point. We've thrown a lot of complex stuff at you.
Yeah.
Technical jargon, economic models.
Right.
It's easy to get lost in all that. But at the end of the day, this isn't just some theoretical debate. The choices we make about AI are going to affect everyone, one way or another.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. If our listener is sitting there feeling like, whoa, information overload, what's the one big takeaway they should remember about this whole efficiency paradox thing?
The biggest thing to remember is that making AI more efficient, that's not the finish line. It's just a tool,
Right.
It's a way to get to something better. The real goal is to use AI to make our lives better, to solve problems. But we got to do it in a way that's sustainable and fair.
So it's not just about speed and cheapness. It's about using AI wisely, responsibly.
Exactly. And that means understanding there are trade-offs. Every time we use an AI system, we have to ask, what are the good things that could happen? What are the bad things that could happen? Could we get the same result in a more efficient way? Are we really thinking about the environmental and social impact of what we're doing?
Those are some pretty big questions.
They are.
But it sounds like the answers are going to shape the whole future of AI, right?
Absolutely. The future isn't set in stone. It's up to us to decide what kind of future we want. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by working together.
Earlier, we talked about governments and companies taking action, but what about regular people? What can our listener do to help make AI more sustainable?
There's actually a lot you can do, even if you're not a tech whiz or a politician. For starters, be a smart consumer. When you buy stuff or use services that rely on AI, do your homework.
Okay.
Look for companies that are upfront about their sustainability practices. Support the ones doing things the right way.
So put your money where your mouth is, basically.
Exactly. And beyond that, be an advocate. Talk to your friends and family about this stuff. Share articles on social media. Tell your elected officials you care about sustainable AI.
So use your voice, your influence, to push for a better AI ecosystem.
Exactly. And if you're feeling really motivated, you can even contribute to open source projects. The ones developing more efficient AI algorithms or tools to track resource use.
So there are ways to get involved at any level, depending on what you're good at and interested in.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps. And remember, this isn't just about being a good person or saving the planet. It's about making AI better in the long run.
That's interesting. How so?
Well, if we just keep developing AI in a way that's unsustainable, we're basically building systems that are fragile.
Okay.
They might be powerful now, but they'll be vulnerable to things like resource shortages, environmental problems, even social backlash.
So it's about building a future for AI that's not just ethical and fair, but also tough and adaptable.
Exactly. We need to think about the big picture, consider the consequences of what we're doing, and work together to create a future where AI can flourish without wrecking the planet.
Those are some inspiring words. It sounds like the future of AI isn't just about technology. It's about our values, our ethics, our vision for the world.
That's exactly right. The power to shape the future of AI, it's in our hands.
Yeah.
We have to use it wisely.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the AI efficiency paradox. We hope you learned something new, maybe got a different perspective on things, and most importantly, feel like you can make a difference. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a better, more sustainable AI future. Until next time.